Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're dropping into this webcast. We're quite excited today. We are doing season 2, episode 19, and we're doing something that, candidly, I'm a little bit tired of my real reality. We're going to talk about some alternative realities and hopefully some immersive media with my co-host, Andrea Cates, as always, and also 3 esteemed panelists. So we'll maybe wait for a few seconds for people to drop into the fold. Andrea, let's root ourselves. It's 7 months into the pandemic. How are we feeling today?
We're feeling like there are lots of alternate realities that are basically ruling our lives. So I don't even know where my reality is anymore.
So I know for some people coming in, it's like, this is a curiosity. You don't live and breathe kind of XR, MR, AR, and VR. We'll try to describe some of those terms. We'll provide some context up front, and then we'll get right into it with our panelists. So I think, why don't we just get started, Andrea? You know, and I think, Andrea, you had termed this best. I think we're talking about trying to get this out of the science fiction box, trying to get it out of even the gaming and entertainment box and turning it into some real life kind of corporate innovation and customer experience impacts. What's your perspective here?
My perspective is years ago, Second Life. Everybody said, oh, you're going to be living a world of virtual reality day to day. And that was, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago. It seems like it was 20 years ago. And every time I go to something like a World's Fair or the Dubai 2020 Expo, they're saying, oh, mixed reality is going to be in our workplace. And, you know, the promise was there. The reality of reality was not. And yet this year, faster than ever before, partly due to technology changes, partly due to mindset changes, it has changed from science fiction completely into reality, to the point where this weekend I'm going to a conference and it's partly virtual reality. And I've just learned how to use the immersive experience. So it's not Second Life, it's actually real life.
Wonderful. Yeah, we're going to get into a pandemic discussion as well, because I really do think that may be a springboard for the technologies at large. Here we are. We're always here. I think we've done every one of these together. So strangely, we're always available. And then we'll just cover off 2 things before we introduce our panelists. For those that are dropping in going, I don't live it every day. What is things? And it's funny, XR came along. I'm going to ask my panelists maybe when we jump on and introduce them, but I think XR came last. It just, all of a sudden, everybody started using XR as this umbrella term for everything that is outside of your real physical unplugged life. So I've kind of set it up this way with some icons here. You know, augmented reality, kind of everybody kind of, I don't know, would Pokemon Go be kind of everybody's touchstone here? But, you know, you're adding different digital elements or simulated elements to your real life physical world. Mixed reality, you know, it not only adds those elements, but they also react to your physical world. And virtual reality, and one term, it's funny, it's the weakest of the 4 stepsisters. Augmented virtuality is a term that people use. It's not quite fully virtual reality, but it's probably more virtual than anything. But augmented virtuality allows real life to slip in there as well. And so from a mixed reality standpoint, perhaps our audience has heard of Hololens or Magic Leap. Those are 2 of the big players, and it tends to be VR, tends to require a full-on headset and an immersive world. But I'm sure my esteemed experts will educate me on how I've got this wrong, but hopefully it functions as a good overview. And we do this every year. That we're about to do it again in December, but we actually ranked all the technologies, and my experts on XR here may wince as I put immersive media as 8th last year, and we actually take a rigorous approach to this in terms of both trends and size of market and knock-on effects and a whole bunch of different criteria. But my sense is it may be moving up this year. We haven't done the full analysis yet, but if I look at something like blockchain and I look at immersive media, they're almost going in 2 separate directions, where I think immersive media, certainly in a pandemic, seems to have a lot of different use cases, real life use cases, and it seems to be, short of some supply chain issues, have a real kind of business model that makes some sense, and you know, people are starting to shape around it, versus blockchain, which still is languishing a little bit in terms of finding itself. Andrea, you got any thoughts in terms of context setting this technology amongst all the others?
I think one of the things that's interesting is that we're taking it more for granted. So I walk into manufacturing, well, this is before COVID, but walk into a manufacturing facility and it's almost second nature that some of the point your mobile phone at this particular aspect of the manufacturing process, and you can have an augmented training guide or something like that. So it's almost like second nature, the same way that now we take out a phone and take pictures and videos all the time. We used to have bandwidth issues. So I think one of the things that's interesting is I'm wondering if even in 5 years, we'll make these distinctions at all, if it'll just be so much a part of what we do that it's less of a category and more of a blended category. That's a thought of where it might go in the future.
Certainly AR has had that situation, right? People use filters on their Snapchat and nobody calls it augmented reality, but that's what they're using. So you are correct. All right, we've taken 6 minutes. I think it's time we introduce our panelists because I'd love to get their thoughts on all of this. So from left to right, RAFFAELLA Camera. She founded Accenture's kind of XR practice. She has raised a ton of money for different companies and people from around the world. She's a global subject matter on XR. She's graced many of the world stages. She's an advisor to Women and XR Fund, and she's a board member for the Advanced Imaging Society. Little known fact about RAFFAELLA before we jumped on here. She was the national swimming champion of Italy at some point in time in her life. So, I don't know if we've just revealed that to the world, RAFFAELLA, but congrats on your complete pedigree of success in XR and swimming. So welcome to our show.
Thank you so much, Sean.
Dana XAVIER DOJNIK. I knew I was going to get that wrong. Sorry. She loves to switch on the light bulbs of people around technology. She has led many teams in a multitude of different environments, both agency and companies. She originally started in New York in consulting and advertising. She worked at 22 Squared and worked at BBDO Atlanta. She spearheaded VR for IHG. She was the first female partner for Foundry 45, and she's a founding member of Women in VR AR in Atlanta. And now she currently sits as SVP Culture of Happiness and Growth at Crate ATL. Sorry, I nearly got that wrong. Have I missed anything, Dana?
I think you've got it all, Sean. Thank you for having me.
Okay. And she's also a frequent Century Mile bike rider. So she can be found gracing the streets of, are you phoning us from Atlanta today?
I am, yeah.
All right, we'll talk later. I'm a biker as well. We'll trade notes about Atlanta biking. Great. And then finally, I have a good colleague of mine who I've known for many years, Emily Smith out of Toronto. She used to work for the International Olympic Committee, and she was so, I guess, impressed by a presentation done at the time, probably very early on immersive 360 experiences. She got involved. She has co-founded an immersive startup before. She has advised many different categories, including education, tourism, and retail. She's built a community for geeks. She co-produces a regular event called, is it AWE or Awe Night TO? I'm going to say AWE.
I usually say AWE Night TO. Yep, we're one of the AWE nights across the world, but it does come from Augmented World Expo.
And I know there's some crazy shenanigans that go down to this. It's kind of like a group of people around Toronto that are really good at what they do, but know how to have fun as well. And she's now currently sits as Director of Customer Success for Embodied Labs, which is a really interesting VR-based platform that allows people to kind of, I guess, identify and empathize with different positions people have in terms of either health conditions or aging conditions or other things. Hopefully I've expressed that correctly. Emily, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Let's get into it. People want to know stuff, and I pulled some stats, and unfortunately, you guys know this better than me. Depending on who you talk to in this space, the stats are so either hyperinflated or underinflated, depending on what story. So I put an asterisk beside all of these just because when you try to project something out 4 years from now, it's really tough. But looking at most of the different metrics, you look at a situation here that You have an industry that appears to be growing revenue-wise. You have people, whether they know it or not, using a lot more AR and VR. You've got a lot of investment going into it, and it's becoming increasingly more sophisticated as it turns from a consumer to an industry-led position. So my question to my panel, real quick thought here. Will it be the airplane skyrocketing up, or the train that is the little engine that keeps going, or the snail-paced kind of growth over the next 4 years? Anybody want to predict or chime in on this one?
I'll jump in, Sean. You know, it's been interesting, you know, the waves of change and the evolution of this immersive technology, I'll say, genre over the last, you know, really, you know, 20 years. You know, we've gone through that trough of disillusionment, and whether you're talking AR or VR, it'll be, you know, somewhere along, or even XR as a sort of umbrella term, somewhere along that continuum. And just as sort of your stats are kind of under these predictions, we also see how people are adopting these technologies. And something as, you know, as fervent as our pandemic has really started to shine light on how these technologies could really, not to be punny, augment the way we communicate, experience, and really dive in deep with brands. And I think that any company right now that is really not sort of dipping their toe in the water, if not already like feet first in, are really going to be left behind, because this technology is here to stay. It might be number 8 on your list there, but it's top of mind, and it should be, as far as how we're thinking of utilizing the technology at a personal level, whether it be with our phones or on our tablets right now. For others who, you know, it might have the advantage of a headset or glasses, that continuum is, I think, on the upswing a lot faster than I would have probably thought 2 to 3 years ago, because of the pandemic and lots of other factors. Anybody else?
We're gonna pause on the pandemic for a minute. I want to have a full-on discussion around the pandemic, because I really do think it's changed the arc of what we're talking about. For the other two panelists, any broad strokes in terms of how you see the industry? Because I'll be honest, like if I looked at some headlines from 3 years ago, the numbers might have even been so much more bigger. And to Dana's point, we may have gone through this slope of disillusionment to get to where we are now. Any thoughts here, guys?
Well, so I think, yes, you do find many different numbers depending on, you know, what's the source, or even how the industry is sliced and diced. But I think that pretty much everyone who's on the panel here, we believe that XR is nothing but the next wave of digital. So just a different way of interacting with information. It's not going to be on a flat screen anymore, but it's going to be in a spatial environment. If you break it down to that, in that simple concept, then you know, how fast or slower it goes depending on what happens in the ecosystem does not quite matter. And what really matters is that you are working with it, and that you start changing your business processes, your internal processes, and also the way that you work with consumers in a way that allows you to do that. Yeah. One of the reasons why sometimes you see XR maybe slowing down a little bit is not really because AR or VR is not necessarily ready yet, but it's because just like the internet or mobile, for that matter, was or still is, it's really an ecosystem play. So it's not just the fact that you can see something on your phone in AR, or that you can see something in VR. It's the fact that you need to be able to have the infrastructure ready. You know, as Dana was talking about, being able to stream things, being able to do edge computing, having enough 5G towers there to send that type of information. It's the fact that you need to be able to have, for example, a UI paradigm that is easy enough and common enough that everyone can use it and use it easily. The form factor is not exactly quite there yet. I think the VR headsets are still cumbersome and as much as the Quest is awesome, the Quest 2 is even better. It's still kind of like can give people a little bit of a sense of claustrophobia, or you're a little bit locked into that specific position. So we're all expecting glasses to come out and different form factors. So there are a variety of different things that the different ecosystem players have to be able to unlock, and they all have to unlock at the same time in order to be able to get to the point where it's all been it's mass usage. However, yes, this year things have gone much faster, and we're seeing particularly training and collaboration really taking a huge step. And I'm sure Emily can talk about what's happening with her company, the great success that they're having, and there are lots of other examples like that.
Well, I have, we're going to get into the pandemic too. I'm really curious to know all of your thoughts on where that's going to take us. But Emily, I'm going to ask you point blank. There was a survey done amongst XR experts, and generally the median line was this becomes a mainstream technology in 2024. So there was a suggestion that it wasn't yet, maybe it was more on the fringes, but it becomes mainstream 2024. Are we in a like you used to work for the Olympics, like that's only 4 years from now? Are you on that camp or not?
4 years comes up really quickly. I mean, there will need to be a combination of things to happen to make it really mainstream, I think. But we are well on our way with the number of people who are just using filters on their Zoom calls. Everyone's got a filter and a background on your Zoom call. The number of people who are discovering the kind of learning you can do in VR. And then the fact that some of the impediments are, some of the walls we're learning how to climb over, things like the price of VR headsets, and we're gonna have 5G to make things work a little bit faster. So I would say, yeah, by 2024, why not?
Sure.
Yeah.
It reminds me of like Tesla. I think Tesla could have invented everything in the world. The unfortunate part of it was he was born in like the early 1900s, right? So he didn't have 5G and he didn't have a whole bunch of stuff that he needed. So
Yeah.
Andrea, I thought you might want to at least service up the topic around the pandemic and your own thoughts on XR.
Well, I'm very interested actually in what the panelists think, because the pandemic, what we've observed so far from a future-proofing perspective is two things. And they're kind of at cross purposes. One is this huge speeding up of things, like, you know, grandmothers that suddenly want to see their grandkids. And so they learn Zoom, maybe hard to do, but they figure it out. And then the next week you see them with like a funny disguise on or a background, virtual background. You're like, Grandma, how cool is that? Or at the same time, there's this, as someone was just saying, this lag, because there's a difference in platforms. You know, you go from one to the other. I'm on Zoom, I'm on Teams, I'm on GoToMeeting, and suddenly there's this slowdown. So very interested in terms of the pandemic. I mean, I think that would like to ask the panel, and wouldn't mind the next slide for this, because very interested in what you're thinking. From on the one hand, RAFFAELLA, I'm very interested in your look at cross industries, right? Manufacturing, we've worked in automotive where, once again, the virtual owner's manual or anything that used to be real, you know, there's sort of three areas we look at: doing the same things we've been doing, but in an enhanced way. So that's one category. Another is doing totally different things you couldn't do before, you know, to equip people. And then the third is what you see on the horizon. So interested, RAFFAELLA, in any of those categories with the pandemic. What have you seen speeding up? What have you seen kind of going slower than you expected?
Well, certainly any form of training has had and has to speed up. It was already a need that there was, because there is, generally speaking, something that we call a skill gap. but it's impossible right now to train people the regular way, the traditional way. You cannot get them in the offices. You cannot get them, you know, in a specific classroom to be able to do that. And that goes from, you know, general education to training healthcare workers, to training even people on the manufacturing floor to learn how to use a specific piece of machinery, or how to set up a lab, or how to do something else like that. And if you just think about the financial impact of something like that, in the US, companies are spending $83 billion per year, at least that was in 2019, to train people. That's about $1,300 per student. And yet, still with that, we have a skills gap that they account for leaving 2.4 million jobs unfilled between 2018 and 2028, and that seems to have an economic impact of about $2.3 trillion. So if you just think about it that way, it's a huge economic impact, and it's a big problem that really training in VR and AR seems to help with, and the pandemic has certainly sped up that specific process.
Well, I have one quick follow-up. One of the things that's interesting is that we are looking at a slide. Some people hear us as a podcast. So we noticed that there's a blue line that's manufacturing construction with a big concept of growth, you know, big indication of growth. The next one is public sector. And then we have obviously professional services and retail. Some of the places where you're really going to be able to capitalize on this. And I liked what you said earlier about it's sort of digital plus being able to take the infrastructure that's there. We've had digital twins in manufacturing for years. Have you seen anything in particular? Because we love specific stories. You don't have to tell names. Specific stories of a company or a type of company that's really taken this pandemic and accelerated their investment or their participation in VR or XR of some sort. RAFFAELLA.
I think that most industries, at least if you're thinking about how to use AR and VR internally, they were already using it. Specifically, think about automotive. Automotive has been using VR just to design for a number of years. So in that sense, certain things are not quite changing as much, and maybe that's why you see that manufacturing, construction, same thing, for example, for anything that has to do with architecture or real estate. I think where we're seeing that there is a huge push, healthcare is certainly an industry, and again, Emily can talk about that greatly, but it's an industry that's really learning how to use AR and VR to not only help patients and help them get through specific difficult situations, but also to help caretakers or to help doctors learn how to do specific types of surgeries, or how to take care of or understand or feel empathy or put themselves in the situation of how a specific patient is feeling at that specific point. I mean, the list goes down, and obviously everyone knows about the Walmart example of how they trained up to 1 million employees to learn how to deal with customers during Black Friday. That is going to be a different type of Black Friday this year in any case, but there are lots of those examples, and it's just accelerating greatly.
So let me get to Emily, and you can go to the next slide, Sean, because I'll move into the next theme of this. But I also want to acknowledge thank you to Jean-Marc Frangos, who says for VR training, we should check out Virtuoso, a UK company with an Italian founder. Don't know if it's a swimmer, but it is an Italian founder who is trailblazing in Europe. So thank you for that, Jean-Marc.
Yeah, and if you want, I can tell you a little bit about Virtuoso, actually. I know him very well. It's really a way to create PowerPoint type information in VR. It's a very simple tool. You can just basically drop 3D content or 360 content very easily and walk people through a specific PowerPoint.
That's great. Well, I think we needed probably a 2-hour webcast on this one, because we could talk about this forever. Emily, interested in your building onto that category of the pandemic.
Sure. There are two aspects that I know I notice the most in the retail sector. I think, as Rafaela said, there was usage of AR in the try before you buy in the e-commerce that we see on the slide, definitely happening before the pandemic. But there is expansion in that there, for example, there's the Shop Here program here in Toronto where Shopify and Google are helping a lot more small retailers get online in cases where they weren't able to have online stores before. So we're seeing the small stores not only get online, but start using the AR, and crazy statistics like 94% higher conversion rates when you have when customers can look at a 3D AR file versus having no 3D AR file to look at. So that's a big one. And then where I am at Embodied Labs, there was an initial hiccup in that what we do is help to train caregivers in senior living communities, for example, future nurses and personal support workers. And there was an initial hiccup in that people are hesitant in some places to put the VR headsets onto their learners just because of fears of transmission. So one of the things that the company ended up adding, I've been there since the summer, but I know they did this in the springtime, adding a mode where you can do distance learning over Zoom. So one person is going through the VR experience and pointing out the different aspects and using your hands, and the learners are listening in, and so sort of seeing and hearing and feeling as much as they can over Zoom. So I know it's a change, but then our customers are still able to teach and learn even through the pandemic. So it's kind of an initial hiccup, but then the usage went back up again.
Well, there's a lot to talk about in the pandemic, and one you can go to the next slide as well, Sean. I'll read it for the people listening to this. This is one about spatial, how work should be. And there's a lot in terms of what someone was said a moment ago, where just getting used to the fact that that data is in space. It's 3D, it's motion, it's experiential, it's kinesthetic. It's a different way of thinking about data, kind of Minority Reportish, where you can reach out and feel the data. Dana, I'm wondering, in the pandemic, if your projections about where things might go lined up with the reality. What do you think the pandemic opened the door for in terms of this whole mixed experience?
I think Rafaela hit it earlier on when she said, there are lots of companies out there already utilizing VR for training and lots of other ways to leverage all of these immersive technologies into their buyer cycle or their online platforms. But I think the leap is really with the I'll say hesitation of change. We need to all sort of get comfortable with that quickly. And if there's anything the pandemic has done, has really afforded everybody to sort of get comfortable with change. Earlier this morning, I was on a leadership training call, and they were talking about sort of that same S wave of change. And how, early on back in March, we were really uncomfortable with all that change. And for some people, it's exciting and easy to really deal with. And for others, it's almost crippling. But, we're coming into this uptick, I'll say, for the pandemic, if anybody's referring to the pandemic as an uptick, into this level of being more comfortable. We're still being careful. We are, still wearing masks and all of that. But yet we are getting comfortable with getting out more, understanding how to be outside in safe spaces, get in touch with family, having your pod of people you know, your COVID team around you. So, and I think that, and, you know, and then there's that really, you know, we're really comfortable and coming out and we actually want to do something new. That's the end of that S curve. But I think it's the, you know, this almost the same as like, oh, maybe you tried Google Cardboard years ago and you're like, oh, I got a paper cut on my nose, right? But now you know, maybe you had an Oculus Go and, you know, my son just was like, Mom, are we going to get the Quest 2, right? And I was like, well, it's white. I really like the black one, but you know, we'll probably order a Quest 2, maybe on Amazon Prime Days if they're offering it.
Yeah.
But,
so I have a quick question before we turn to the next topic. So we talked about the ecosystem play, the 5G towers, edge computing, the infrastructure that's required, and also that moment where it's like, it's the only way to do something, right? That there's just a big win where everybody overnight says, well, I'm going to figure this out because I have to because of the pandemic. Is there something quick that you want to share in terms of something you've observed with either a client or a project where someone really got on board with it? Because we'd love to learn what it took.
You know, I'll say one of the biggest airlines here in Atlanta decided to utilize VR for training their ramp workers. Those are the people who have to turn around the planes as quick as possible. And while I was over at Foundry 45, they had implemented this for, you know, one location, get some folks trained, because it took upwards near, you know, 60 to 90 days for folks to get their FAA credentials to get out onto the tarmac. And you know, from day one, we could put them in a VR headset and they could, you know, get out on the tarmac, understand all of the things that are going on around them, whether it be luggage carriers, food service, all those things, all those, you know, issues and challenges that might be there when stepping out onto that tarmac for the first time. But being safe doing that in a VR headset, and then spotting all of the issues, you know, whether it be tiny, minute cracks because they're doing a visual, you know, a visual survey of the plane, or, you know, what's leaking, what might not be, you know, what might not be safe, and turning this plane around very quickly. So I'd say, you know, even though the airlines are taking a big hit right now, there's a big opportunity for them to find some cost savings and really see the ROI for training, not just, you know, on the tarmac, but, you know, throughout the whole industry. So that's a big win, I'd say, for that particular industry. That's
really helpful.
Yeah.
Very helpful. So back to you, Sean.
Yeah, I think we covered a lot of the pandemic. Let's consider this an industry that has this ongoing cadence to it, and that there's a longevity in life even beyond pandemic-based things, although who knows how long the pandemic will last. We thought we'd share kind of a few different examples just to get us in the mood, and then I want to pivot to you guys to look at what are some of the more interesting examples by certain types of industry that you might be looking at. You know, we've looked at the work done here. I think Pearson and a couple of different partners were involved in a really, really cool 3D anatomy platform where, quite frankly, I'm usually grossed out by health stuff, but if I had this, maybe I wouldn't be, because it was quite descriptive without all the blood and gore. So, you know, certainly your talk about the plane handlers reminds me of some of the stuff that people are doing with HoloLens in terms of just having people wear the headgear and relay back to maybe an expert that might be sitting at home or might be just woken up because the hydro lines are down and they're looking at a specific thing. I decided to put a company that's maybe a little bit familiar to you, Emily, in here, because I thought it was quite an interesting use case in terms of getting caregivers some level of, I keep on saying empathy, but I guess it's embodied, but I do think there's some empathy as part of this in terms of just what your patient or what your elderly person that you're taking care of may be going through given certain conditions or another. I'm a bit of a data geek, so I love the fact that Wall Street Journal has turned all of your financial information into something that you can visualize online. So this is a real interesting data visualization tool. One that you're familiar with here, Dana, in terms of just, you know, certainly in a pandemic as well, I hate to go back to it. It's like, it's tough to travel around and actually do kind of the level of tourism and a level of kind of understanding what's going on around in our world. So certainly I think this predated that, but it probably has more resonance even now in terms of just what Uganda is going through in terms of their agriculture and just kind of cultural kind of things that you were involved in. Magic Leap has the best demonstration videos. That's all I'm going to say. They really do. I'm not too sure if you're advocates or not, but it's like in one visual, it makes sense what they're trying to do. And here's an example of a factory worker trying to find the right box, and there's a visual help there, augmented to help him. Key.com real estate in China, they got 660 million users. They've got 4 million properties, and most of them are on VR. So you can actually have a VR tour through the place, and you don't have to risk your safety by going out. SoulMachines, which I know you're a fan of, Andrea. You know, they've created this Jamie woman in ANZ Bank in Australia, where they've combined some AI and machine learning with some augmented reality and virtual reality. I guess it's augmented reality to deliver kind of a customer experience interface. I'm a huge football fan, so I don't like the Ravens, but I thought their kind of augmented piece here where you know, good things happen on screen, all of a sudden this massive raven comes through your screen. I've always wondered when people score goals, why do I have to pan toward the fans or the players? Why can't there be a big logo or a swoosh or an animal jumping out at you? So very cool stuff there. So I thought I would just leave it as an open kind of thing here across the different categories. And I know there was a previous research study that ranked the categories as these are probably the most interesting categories in order. But depending on your preference, you might have a different rank order. Dana, maybe start with you this time. Just as you think about different industry applications, are there ones that get you really excited?
Thanks, Sean. You know, my passion really lies in utilizing immersive technology for good. Emily, I love what Embodied Labs is doing to really bring that to life for caregivers on the patient side as well, but really for the caregivers, because I think it is that sort of empathetic side that needs to be woke in everyone right now. We are dealing with it on a daily basis. So earlier you referenced DIG, Development and Gardening, who's an amazing group here in Atlanta, who's doing some fantastic work bringing sustainable agriculture over to folks in Uganda and Kenya and Senegal, and teaching them how to utilize farming to thrive in a very, I'll say, underserved community. And we're able to bring that to life for their donors here in the States through VR and really show what they're doing and have them feel like they're on the ground with the people, you know, planting and harvesting. There's another group, change.org is working with the Floyd Family Foundation, George Floyd's family, and another local team here in Atlanta, Beam Imagination, is brought that to life through holograms and really showcasing the work that the family is trying to do. And it's not just a PR stunt, right? They're really trying to tell the story and how the foundation is really looking to promote, you know, obviously George Floyd's justice, but why this tech is, you know, out there getting top billing on CNN and all the other news channels across the world is that they really want to showcase what's going to change because of his death, and how that family is really utilizing immersive technology to help tell that story in a new way to garner the attention that it deserves. So, you know, those are sort of two near and dear, closer to my hometown here, but also to my heart. So, but there's plenty of other ways and other avenues that it's being utilized for good as well.
Sure. I think for me, coming from what I do, the storytelling aspect is a big through line to some of these different areas. In customer service and experience delivery, where I have the distance mode over Zoom at my disposal now that is about customers being able to try things out on their own. And I'm there to help in real time. And then in terms of storytelling, tourism and travel is a big one, right? Where we can go to other places in virtual reality, or even in augmented reality. I recently worked for an app for a company called Pop Sandbox, which takes you from place to place in the city, but then also allows you to experience what a place used to look like in the past, and hear some of the stories, see cartoons or animations of what's happening there. And then in real estate, there's the virtual reality tours. I'm kind of an apartment. I love to look at different kinds of apartments, so I'm always looking online, and I'm starting to get tons of ads for different apartments. And in many of them, they've taken a 3D scan of the place. So you can, even on your phone, put yourself inside that 3D scan of an apartment and start to imagine what your life would be like in there. And you don't even need the VR headset.
Very cool.
I'll try to then do a thread across all these different industries in a different way too. We often, I think, stop and think about AR and VR as the way that you can look at information, but there is something else to consider across all these different industries. It's the amount of behavioral data that we can gather while we are doing any form of experience, or we're using any form of solution, and the way that that behavioral data can be used to really provide any user with a truly individualized response back. So anything from, we've done some examples of those too, but anything from detailed eye tracking analytics to the way that you might have moved or not moved or reacted, or how your pupils reacted, or there are many different kinds. It is something that will lead any company to take a different direction in what they decided to stream, show, or offer, or even the way that they might offer something to a specific user. We did something for the merchandising, so for the retail sector, to determine, to test where people were looking for a specific product in a store, and we recreated it in VR, and then we used detailed eye tracking analytics to determine what they were looking at, for how long, why, what type of actions they were performing while doing that, and that led to actually different conclusions that were more interesting from an overall holistic perspective versus one specific package. We did that with Kellogg's about 1.5 years ago. So that is something to keep in consideration, because it's one of the huge advantages of these types of headsets or devices.
It's so interesting, Raffaella, because I was in charge. I was head of marketing for Guinness, like in a different life back in the, let's call it the 90s safely. And we spent an absolute fortune doing eye tracking in a bar to figure out where people look in a bar. I won't tell you how big our budget was then. And now if we did that, we could do that for, you know, a fraction, an infinitesimal part of that, that cost that we would have endured. So
a quick follow. Oh, go ahead, Danny.
Sorry, I was going to say, Sean, that's interesting because not from the eye tracking side of things, but from the promotional side of things. I had a big whiskey client come to me last year and say, we want to change the tasting experience through these, you know, they had a partnership with Tower Liquors, and some of the Tower Liquors have really, I'll say, high-end tasting rooms, and they wanted to change the experience through VR and bring those people who were there for this experience on a tour of, you know, over in Scotland of the whole distillery and really, really create some fun around the brand that is usually a little bit more stuffy. So it was another interesting way to utilize the technology, not just for, you know, information, but also to really have the brand, you know, shine in a different way. And, you know, there's stats out there and lots of findings that say you put on a headset, and because you are, you know, 100% absorbed and that whole rest of that world is blocked out, there's 40 to 60% and sometimes even higher better retention of what's going on in that headset that, you know, any point of sale or anything could ever get across. So with those kinds of stats, you know, it's really, I'll say, surprising that there's sort of not a bigger following to me in the VR industry for some of the brands.
No, I mean, we're emotional social animals, right? So we do make decisions that way. Andrea.
Well, I had a comment, and then I'll have it, and then I assume you'll want me to lead people through this. We're about to talk about the toolbox, and one of the things that's interesting is you've mentioned that there are some technical capabilities, you know, and as the form factor gets to be a little more invisible and less clunky, that's one thing. This ecosystem that you mentioned, the notion of people's learning curves, but also this is a confluence, and I think it'll be really interesting to hear everybody thinking about the confluence of things that have come together, including, as RAFFAELLA just said, brain science, being able to understand how do people learn, you know, and being able to understand what is it about, as Dana said, a tasting experience that is what is memorable, and how we really understand people's sensations in a different way, because you couldn't do that when everything had to be, you know, A versus B. I remember in the beginning of immersive learning, there were kind of laser discs, and you had to say, are you a right-handed surgeon or a left-handed surgeon? And then it was, quote, customized, right? But there's a lot more to what kind of surgeon you are than left-handed, right-handed. But since it was a binary world, we were, you know, limited to that. So I'm very interested in terms of this next question, which is, what are the different tools that you think are coming? And in terms of the applications, where do you see the next wave? We've talked about confluence, but what are some really good use cases that you've seen in terms of these tools, edge computing, 5G, those kinds of things that are leading to the ability to offer completely different experiences? I'm going to start with Emily. Very interested in this.
Yeah. For me, one thing that I like to watch is the 5G aspect of this. I originally became fascinated with immersive technology because of immersive theater. So I'm always curious how the line between the physical and the digital world become less and less and less important, how the two are more integrated. And I think that as 5G develops, there are going to be less opportunities where we have to wait for something to load, where we have to do 5 steps to have the living room chair in my living room to see if I want to buy it. I can just hold up my phone, or I'll be wearing my glasses anyway with AR mode turned on. And so the living room chair will appear there, and I'll be able to just snap my fingers and it'll change colors. So that kind of speed is going to be a big one, I think.
Great. So Dana, I'll ask you the same. I'm really interested in what you see in terms of for a business innovator, for an innovator, you know, what should they be learning right now, or what should they be paying attention to from a toolbox perspective?
Do you know, I think there's so many easy opportunities for folks to jump into the technology. You know, ARKit and ARCore have now been around for a few years, and we've all have like a supercomputer in our pocket. You've got Google Lens, which you can actually now use Google Lens to just aim at something and search for it. Or you could use Google Search and pull up an AR asset instead of just an explanation or a video, and plop that 3D asset and, you know, have a hedgehog on your desk and have all the information, right? As the putting my mom hat on for school, that we've been at home and trying to like make it a little bit more exciting, right? That's huge. So, you know, and then there's super easy things like Spark AR and things like that, where you can learn to, you know, do all the lenses and things like that for Facebook and all the other fun Snapchats and things like that out there. So I think there's so many easy to grasp tools for everyday learners. And then for, you know, big corporations who are, you know, just dipping their toe in the waters, they can start there too, because it's easy, you know, the Shopify reference and Google and combining that. There's so many, I'll say, easy opportunities and avenues to walk down. It's just a matter of taking those first steps.
Well, I'll ask RAFFAELLA, you just wrote a Harvard Business Review article as well. You look at a lot of industries and innovators in different corporate settings. I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about one or two things. And you also talked about the digital divide, sort of the skills gap. Is there one set of skills you think everybody should just get on board with in terms of being a corporate leader and just saying, I'm going to hone my toolbox right now? Are there one or two things you think should be in everyone's toolbox?
I think changing it a little bit, instead of talking about a toolbox, what I would say is that any company needs to quickly create and manage a 3D repository of any asset that they own, from their own offices or headquarters or manufacturing facilities, to their machinery, to their products, to anything else that they have. The same way that the web forced everyone to have digital assets, 2D flat digital assets. It's now time for 3D assets that will be used for anything from training to marketing to advertising lenses to you know, help on the job. I think that is a massive undertaking that different companies are going after in different ways, and some of them are trying to do it for a variety of other institutions, and some will have to do it for themselves. I would definitely concentrate on that.
It's brilliant. Love that. Back to you, Sean.
I think we're closing in on the end of the hour. Like we get 5 passionate people in a room, and all of a sudden, like, the hour goes like that. But I thought I'd just zip through the corporate innovation stuff. We'll obviously post this online so people can get a sampling of what some of the stats that we've shown here, how we can collaborate across distance, you know, how building ideas becomes better with XR, and then just looking at how the customer experience may improve. I'm showing some home renovation stuff, and also Ubisoft from Montreal is building an innovation factory. So how do you build new business models entirely based on XR? How do we become bolder, and how do we get customer feedback in real time? I think one of you guys was mentioning earlier about how it's just not engaging the customer, but it's also what you learn from them. Walmart was mentioned as well. A lot of different press on Walmart. And how do we align people across our ecosystems and hopefully bring stuff to light either in smart cities, or I'm throwing up your George Floyd hologram piece as well. So those are a whole bunch of things. I guess I've got 2 final questions. So these are like real quickies here. What's the best advice for somebody that really wants to get engaged, either their companies or themselves, into this in the future? We'll start with Emily.
I think jump in, give it a try, but also there are increasingly organizations like the On-Night meetups or the VR AR Association in all kinds of cities where you can go and just talk to the people who are doing it. In many cases, they are small startups, but not only startups who are working in this space and who are thinking about this. Sometimes another word that gets thrown around is spatial computing. So you'll meet the people who are thinking about this in terms of the computing that takes place all around us instead of on a screen, and that's a key thing.
Wonderful.
So go and meet those people.
can learn a lot from startups. Sometimes you don't want to imitate them, but you can certainly learn a lot from them, right? So, RAFFAELLA, any cautionary tales or practical tips in terms of people wanting to get more engaged?
I'll go with a very simple, practical one. Get a headset, buy a Quest, and download, download any form of AR game on your mobile. Play with it and get used to it. It's going to be very difficult for you to talk about something that you have not experienced. This is not a technology that can just be discussed. It is an experience. So unless you do it and you have a sense for it, you're not going to understand it.
The art of doing, right? And then Dana, any thoughts here?
You know, I think Emily and RAFFAELLA definitely hit on the ones I usually would share. Get out there, experience it, put a headset on, bring one into your home, borrow one, wipe it down with an alcohol pad first, you know, but borrow one. You know, they're out there. I'd hope to think that, you know, libraries will be having them to be able to check out at some point in the near future. Your kids' schools probably have them at their disposal. But really jump in, take that small step, and don't be afraid. Don't feel like, oh, I'm going to look silly when I put that headset on. You will be so surprised once you choose to put that headset on, and you'll forget about feeling silly, because you are going to be so amazed at what you're experiencing that you'll just forget about the rest of the world. So try it, borrow, and get out there and do it.
Wow, I'm inspired. I'm inspired now. I feel like we've hit the Tony Robbins button on this this call right now. So, and then a quick 10-second hit. Like, what's the biggest game-changing application or news or invention that's just around the corner that's going to springboard this and hockey stick the whole space up? Any quickies on this one?
Well, hopefully Apple's announcement in an hour. We'll see.
I know. I was thinking that might be very timely. What's your guess?
Oh, I don't think it's going to be the glasses yet.
No. It's funny how Apple just completely skated over VR into AR, and now it's kind of like playing a little bit of catch up, but you know, this is news, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm excited about the glasses when they get here for sure. But then also hand interactions. There's a lot going on in developing hand interactions right now. I follow Daniel Beauchamp on Twitter from Shopify, and he's always putting these fascinating experiments out there. And there's a company called ManoMotion that did a hackathon over the weekend. I saw an announcement yesterday that Ultraleap has a new app that's making public touch screens touchless. So all kinds of things going on with hand interactions. That's what I'm excited about. Nice.
Dana, a quickie?
I'm skipping over glasses. I want to pop the contact lens in. You know, Samsung released some at CES this year, and I've been all in. Had the opportunity to go to Stanford University and go to their nano lab and see what they're doing with nanotechnology. So while, you know, we do need to get it into the glasses to have that one small baby step for people, I'm ready for, you know, for the contact lens. And one of my mentors, John Rich, you know, he's all in for, you know, brain computing and wants the implant. I'm not there yet, but I'm all for the contact lens.
Yeah, I'm a little bit scared. That's a little bit too dark Black Mirror for me. So we usually do around the horn quickly. What did we learn today? Andrea, I'll start with you, and then we'll just cascade down. But just a quick 10 seconds. What's
very quick? I want to say that XAVIER and Verbella, Jean-Marc also suggested that everybody remind ourselves that they liked it so well they bought the company, that they liked the experience of going virtual so well that they actually bought the virtual conferencing and the ability to do that. So thank you once again. We always have a great audience. What I learned, you know, I reflected on something interesting that Emily said. I remember going to Sleep No More, which was this play, but it wasn't really a play. You like walked into a house in Boston and you didn't know what was going on. It was like everyone was dressed in costumes, but it was a play in a way. It was kind of deconstructed. And I feel like it's what I've been thinking about after this round the horn is everybody's voice is important, whether it's a filmmaker letting, you know, their perspective on this come in, whether it's a technologist, we don't want only engineers defining what the experiences will be, whether it's someone who understands taste, like a whiskey tasting, what is that all about? You know, how do you simulate that? So I've been thinking about the creativity plus art, plus education, plus brain science mindsets that are going to be required to really step forward here. And I don't want the technology to get people afraid to jump in and create.
And around the corner, any parting thoughts, Emily?
Just constantly fascinated, getting into these discussions every single time. You see that the people who are doing this work have such passion for it and the constant innovation that's going on. And it's super motivating. So thank you.
Thank you. And Dana?
Well, I want to say that this is my first, and sadly, first all-female panel. So I really want to applaud Andrea and Sean for having 3 amazing females on here. And sadly, it's my biggest takeaway that the females are the future. No offense, Sean. But that we also need all those allies out there who are gonna lift us all up. So thank you for having us.
Thank you for that. And RAFFAELLA?
I'll just echo what Dana and Emily said. It's always it's a very small industry still. We all pretty much know each other, and it's always a pleasure having and an honor having the chance to hear what others are doing and learning from them.
Well, thank you for imparting your thoughts to us. We certainly come into the space a little bit more impostery than other subjects, just because we can't specialize in all 30 technologies. So you've definitely opened up our eyes today. And certainly this is where you can get in touch with all of our 3 panelists if you're watching this online. And I'm sure they'll say hi, or at least accept your invitation if you get to them. Just real quickly, we've slipped past the hour, but myself and Andrea are launching the book. So we've got our European launch at this time next week for Europe. So we've decided to chase down people that might be interested in the future beyond innovation in the 44 countries, I think, are in Europe. We're also inviting other people to join us along for the ride, and we've called something called the Futureproofing 66 Global Guild, where you can kind of do a whole bunch of stuff that we're doing over the next few months. Our next regular webcast, if you will, is 2 weeks from now. We're triaging healthy innovation portfolios. That's October 27th. And we referenced it in this webcast today, but we will be re-ranking our 30 technologies. We do a lot of good work. I don't know if this is our best work, but it gets our most hits of anything that we do. So we'll be re-ranking that in December. And so look forward to the Billboard Top 40 of technologies coming to a neighborhood to you soon. So I want to thank my guests. I want to thank my co-host, Andrea. I'm so glad you've allowed small M male me into your conversation, but I echo the thoughts that were mentioned by all of you about blockchain and a whole bunch of other spaces in tech. Good to take a page out of this discussion today. Woman, what was your comment, Dana? Can I say it with women are the future? Women. Okay.
The future's female.
There you go. Oh, I missed it. Anyway, thank you again, and we'll be brief and abrupt. We'll be seeing you, the audience, in the future.